Hello everyone, Juxtaposition here. Today's video will be entitled The Black Dahlia. That's right, the brutal murder of Elizabeth Short, age 22. Really, her brutality and inhumanity and grotesque evil pales all other crimes in the military intelligence community, which would include the Sharon Tate murder, which does not compare to the Elizabeth Short murder in terms of terror and horror. All right, so I'm going to let you know up front, sort of what happened, and then we'll work backwards, and we're going to set the table at the end. We're going to set the table toward the end of this video instead of up front. I'm going to do like a Columbo-esque let you know what happened. But my supposition, I'm just letting you know up front, is the Elizabeth Short Black Dahlia murder was military intelligence and professional killers were involved. More than one, okay? It's not a lone nut with a kitchen cutlery set out there cutting people in half, all right? A very sophisticated crime. And please keep note, folks, where the bodies are discovered is almost always never where the people live, right? There are tremendous clues when you look at where Sharon Tate was murdered and Abigail Folger. They didn't live on those properties, but their bodies were discovered there. In the case of Elizabeth Short, she didn't live in the Leimert Park district of Los Angeles, but she was found in a vacant lot 2.5 miles west of University of Southern California. That's USC, which is a private university there. That's the where George Lucas went to school for film school. That's where Judge Older, the hanging judge for the Manson family, he's an alumni, and also a United States Army pilot for the Flying Tigers, shooting down Japanese planes before Pearl Harbor. The person who sent Charlie Manson to the gas chamber graduated from USC, 2.5 miles to the east of where Elizabeth Short's dead body cut into two parts. Part A and Part B were approximately 2 feet apart. I'm not sure I'm going to get into all the forensic details about her murder. We'll see. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you that Elizabeth Short was born near Boston, Massachusetts. She's actually born in the Hyde Park district of Boston. On July 29th, 1924, Elizabeth Short was born. She grew up to be 5'5", 115 pounds. She was known in the media for having the raven black hair and the alabaster white skin, and that she also apparently wore black dresses, which really accentuated her beauty. But I'm here to tell you the coroner's office said she had brown hair. So sort of like Sharon Tate, well known in Hollywood as a blonde, but she had brown eyes. Okay, so Sharon Tate was a brown-eyed blonde. In the case of Elizabeth Short, she was a brown-haired, blue-eyed beauty. All right, she was born to Cleo Short and her mother, Phoebe. And they bounced around quite a bit. I'll get into the trajectory of her childhood after I describe where her body was found in basically downtown Los Angeles in an area known as Leimert Park district of Los Angeles, which is about 2.5 to 3 miles to the west of the Coliseum, the Los Angeles Coliseum, built to honor the American troops who served in World War I, And that Coliseum was built next door to University of Southern California, that celebrates steroid football and celebrates steroid athletes like O.J. Simpson, who did not graduate from USC but did play football and won the Heisman Trophy playing in the Coliseum, as did Marcus Allen, another steroid football player who played in the Los Angeles Coliseum, approximately 2.9 miles to the east of where Elizabeth Short's body was found in a vacant lot in this Leimert Park district. Now, to be very specific, because that's why you come to my channel, is to get the brutal truth, because the truth can be very brutal. And that's why it's not, the brutal truth is never presented on the national media, in newspapers, radio, and television. And you should know that major components of this military killing of Elizabeth Short were covered extensively by Time Life, who just so happens to have a home called the Time Life House. And it's located half a mile from where Elizabeth Short's body was found. Her body was found approximately, this is just an estimate, it's not exact, because the area has been completely developed now with planned unit homes have been installed. But if you Google 3831 South Norton Avenue, you will find it's on the west side of South Norton Avenue was where Elizabeth Short, 2 pieces of her corpse were found. 3831 South Norton Avenue. Now, the Time Life had a house that had been constructed and finished 9 years before this discovery, this horrifying discovery by a mother who was walking her 3-year-old in a stroller at 10 o'clock in the morning. On January 15th, 1947, the woman discovered Elizabeth Short, which she thought was a mannequin that someone had tossed into the park. And she called police. She actually told him it was a homeless man that was sleeping in the park, because she didn't want to be involved in the horror story of the Elizabeth Short murder. Anyway, 3892 Olmsted Avenue is the Time Life historical house. It actually has a historical significance, and it has a number associated with it. It's called number 864 of the Cultural Monument of Los Angeles Historical Society. Number 864 is the Life Magazine Leimert Park House, located at 3892, and it is 0.6 miles from Elizabeth Short's body, which was found on South Norton Avenue. Now, let me tell you that if you Google that, it won't come up. So you need to Google 3893 Olmsted Avenue, which is named after the Olmsted family, whose father designed Central Park in Manhattan, New York. This neighborhood of the Leimert Park neighborhood is a very historically relevant part of Los Angeles, both for what was going on in 1947 when Elizabeth Short was murdered. She was probably murdered on the 14th of January, 1947. This is the year that Ben Bugsy Siegel was murdered. A few months later, he's murdered in Beverly Hills, not that far away from here. We have William Randolph Hearst, who owns the Hearst newspaper chain, including the Los Angeles Examiner. His reporters were the ones who called Elizabeth Short's mother back in Medford, Massachusetts. They told Phoebe Short that her daughter won a beauty pageant in Los Angeles so that she would talk with them. Then later, the editor of the the Los Angeles Examiner, William Randolph Hearst, broke the news that her daughter had been found murdered in a vacant lot in the what's called the Leimert Park district of Los Angeles. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of perversion that goes on at the William Randolph Hearst Foundation. You do know that William Randolph Hearst was OSS, clandestine military service, all the way. And the reason we know that is because his girlfriend, 32 years younger than him, Marion Davies, was living with him off Coldwater Canyon near Franklin Canyon when Elizabeth Short was murdered. And we know this because William Randolph Hearst's granddaughter, Patricia Hearst, was involved in a clandestine service fake kidnapping called the Symbionese Liberation Army. Years later, in 1974, Patricia Hearst goes missing, except that she's living in a CIA colony called Haight-Ashbury Project on Masonic Avenue, for crying out loud. half a block from where Abigail Folger's mother was the paymaster, near University of San Francisco Jesuits, near St. Ignatius Catholic Parish, near St. Agnes Parochial Elementary School. There's Patricia Hearst, the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst, who has a wife in New York and a girlfriend in Beverly Hills, who gets a street named after her above the Sharon Tate murder scene in Benedict Canyon called Davies Drive, which is a cul-de-sac, directly above the Sharon Tate murder scene. Don't you see? Don't you see that when you have nationally presented stories like Sharon Tate, and they don't discuss NATO bayonets, and when you have a nationally presented story like the Black Dahliah, and they don't mention that it's a military intelligence newspaper who brings you that story, William Randolph Hearst, Los Angeles Examiner, and Life magazine. Yes, and Life magazine has a house 5 blocks from Elizabeth Short's body. So this is why I lean in hard that this is a military killing. Now, I have a boatload of evidence to support my case besides what I've just told you. I've just told you some coincidental data that we've got William Randolph Hearst newspaper covering the Black Dahliah killing and amping it up. It's already a horrible, brutal murder. We don't really know how she was killed. They are saying that it was blows to her head, but her head wasn't that bruised, but she did have surgical cuts from her lips to her earlobes, which is called the Glasgow smile, which is a military terrorism technique. Her body was sawed in two in a surgical manner that only a medical doctor, surgeon would know how to do. So I believe a military surgeon cut her body into 2 parts. And she was killed, somewhere else, and then her body was disposed of probably in a potato sack, 2 potato sacks, because her body was in 2 pieces. I hope I'm not painting too severe of a photograph here in your mind, but it's a brutal, brutal murder. And technically where her bodies were found is about a mile away from where the Lamert Plaza is located. Formerly was a park, now it's a shopping area. Olmsted Avenue, where the Life magazine house is, was named after the Olmsted brothers, whose father, Frederick, designed Central Park in Manhattan, New York. Anyway, so we have this Lamert Park area of Los Angeles, which I think is more than a coincidence that this is where Elizabeth Short was dumped. Now, let me tell you the beginning of the story. So she's born in Boston, but her parents move up to Maine, quick like a bunny rabbit, so they don't stick around. Now, allegedly, her father, Cleo, designed miniature golf courses. Now, this is during the Depression, the Great Depression, and I don't know what the demand was for miniature golf courses. I imagine there was a demand for people to, get their mind off the fact that they're broke, right? Or that unemployment was an epidemic, kind of like the deadly coronavirus was, right? Anyway, what I want to tell you is that I don't really know what her father did for a living, but in 1930, her father decided to abandon ship from his family, and instead he parked his car near the Charleston Bridge, near the Charles River, and disappeared. He disappeared for 12 years. And this is happening when little Elizabeth Short, who her mother called Betty, was 5 years old. So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that Cleo, the father figure, he abandoned the family when Elizabeth was 5 years old. And Elizabeth had sisters. Okay? I'll tell you how many sisters she had. Gee whiz, there's so much information about this case, it's not even funny. It's just hilarious that nobody knows anything really about the minutia. So she was born in Hyde Park area of Boston, but they didn't live there. She was the third of 5, count them, daughters. 5 daughters. So Elizabeth Short had 4 sisters. Her mother's name was Phoebe May Sawyer. That was the maiden name. They very quickly relocated to Portland, Maine in 1927, which would have been, just 2 years after Elizabeth was born, 2.5 years after. And they don't stay there very long. Supposedly, her father lost his savings in the stock market crash of 1929. The problem with that story is I don't think you would have a whole lot of money saved up if you were a miniature golf course designer, which I guess he was doing before the Great Depression happened. So let me stand corrected. She was born, 1925, so we have 4 years before the 1929 crash, right? All right, so anyway, as soon as the crash happens in 1930, Cleo, the father, parks the family car at the Charlestown Bridge, which is in close proximity to Harvard University people. They had moved to what's called Medford, Massachusetts, which is 2 miles from Harvard University in Cambridge. It's really close to Cambridge, which is about 3.5 to 4 miles from downtown Boston. So what I'm trying to tell you is they moved to a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts. They were along the Mystic River, where she resided was on the Mystic River as opposed to the Charles River. I don't know if that's significant or not, but you should know that her childhood was spent in Medford, Massachusetts, along the Mystic River. All right. 12 years go by, and when Elizabeth Short is 18 years old, her father, who was presumed suicide, killed, that he jumped off the bridge into the Charles River and disappeared, and that's why they couldn't find his body. He turns up, no, he's living in Vallejo. He's living in Vallejo when Elizabeth is 18 years old. He apologizes to his wife Phoebe for disappearing for 12 years. He has a new job with the naval shipyards in Vallejo at Mare Island. That's home to the Zodiac killings, in case you didn't know, right? Mare Island, Vallejo, it's the same place. The first 3 Zodiac murders happened in very close proximity to the city of Vallejo and Mare Island. And the number one suspect is, of course, Arthur Lee Allen, who also worked at the Mare Island Naval Shipyard. He worked there too. Perhaps he knew Cleo Short. I'm not saying that Cleo Short is involved in the Zodiac killings. I don't think any one person is involved in them. I think they're military murders. And then the media, led by William Randolph Hearst, who helped name the Elizabeth Short murder the Black Dahliah, they named the killings in and around Vallejo as Zodiac killings. And they only did that 7 months after the first Zodiac killing, which was not attributed to Zodiac at all. See, the media can name anything they want, anytime they want, any place they want. They did that with Elizabeth Short. They did that with Sharon Tate, didn't they? They didn't come up with the Manson family hoax murder for 4 months. They didn't do that. They just said, oh, it's helter-skelter, it's confusing, we don't know what's going on. Oh, yeah, he did it. That's it. So that's what they did with Sharon Tate. That's what they did with Zodiac. That's kind of what it looks like they did with Son of Sam. That's, it was David Berkowitz. He did it, right? Well, I'm sure there were 1,000 potential people that could have done it, right? But we have to hone in on the one person that the media anoints as the murderer. In the case of the Elizabeth Short and in the case of the Zodiac, no specific murderer was ever named, nor arrested, nor arraigned, nor convicted. So that does make it different than the Sharon Tate case, where they convicted innocent people who were scapegoated. But anyway, Elizabeth Short decided that she wanted to go see her father, go see her daddy out in Vallejo. So she up and moves from Medford, Massachusetts, out to Vallejo to live with her father, who's working at the naval yard at Mare Island. which, by the way, is in close proximity to Skaggs Island, which has just been reactivated as a radio frequency weapons center, and that is where Bill Graham was killed. That's what I'm telling you. Bill Graham was killed near Vallejo, near the Zodiac killings. Bill Graham was killed 300 feet from a naval weapons center. He was killed on a Navy island, Skaggs Island. That's where Bill Graham of the CIA was killed. Sharon Tate's father worked for the CIA and Army intelligence. Nicole Brown Simpson's father was an Army intelligence spy for Army Airborne. They all worked at Los Alamitos and Long Beach and San Pedro. Sharon Tate's father did. Nicole Brown's father worked at Los Alamitos. Elizabeth Short's father worked at Vallejo Mare Island Navy Yard. All her boyfriends worked at Air Force or Army bases. It was Army Air before it was Air Force. So all of her boyfriends were Army Airborne sergeants, majors, or lieutenants. And she always lived on or near an Army air base all the way time up to her death. It's another red flag that she was murdered by military murderers. All right. So Elizabeth moves to Vallejo to be with her father. She lives with them for a while. They don't give you an exact amount of time. Then there's a cover story that he didn't want her around anymore because she was a handful. So she goes down to what was called Camp Cook, which was Army Air Base down in Lompoc, which is in Santa Barbara County, near Santa Maria and Buellton, if you didn't know, near Goleta. My last video was based on Goleta and Goleta and Rancho El Capitan and Refugio Road and the Ronald Reagan Ranch. And that's in close proximity to where Elizabeth Short went at Lompoc to what was called Camp Cook. It's now called Vandenberg Space Force Base. It was Vandenberg Air Force Base, but it's been consolidated into what's called Space Force because now you know we have all these drones and weaponized 5G towers and 5G satellites above us. So that's what Space Force is. Not about going to the moon. It's about encasing everybody into the prison. And Elizabeth Short moved in with an Army Air Sergeant by the name of, let me get his name straight here. She moves from her father and go quick like a bunny rabbit, ends up living in Lompoc with a man who is to remain nameless, and he supposedly abused her, and she lived with him in 1943. Then she moved to Santa Barbara with money, I don't know where she got it, whereupon she was arrested by police in the city of Santa Barbara on September 23rd, 1943, and because she was 19 years old, drinking at a saloon, and the legal age of drinking in California at that time was 21, and she was 19 years old. So she was booked for illegal drinking. In juvenile courts ordered her to be sent back to her mother in Massachusetts, but she diverted that order and went to Miami, Florida instead, where she also had relatives. She didn't want to go back to her mother, so she went to Miami. And while in Miami, Elizabeth Short met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr., who was a decorated Army Air officer. He's a major, right? So that's above a sergeant. And he was assigned to the 2nd Air Commando Group, and he was training for deployment into Southeast Asia Theater during World War II. Because this is while World War II is going on, and Elizabeth Short has now found a new boyfriend in the form of Matthew Michael Gordon, a major in the United States Army Air. But he gets deployed, right? So now she's writing letters, and they're in a letter writing relationship. He proposes marriage. She accepts his offer of marriage. Unfortunately, Major Matthew Michael Gordon is killed in an airplane crash just a few days before the war ended. He's killed on August 10th, 1945, less than 1 week before the official end of World War II. That comes, like a month after Howard Hughes plowed his United States Army Air spy plane into the Los Angeles Country Club golf course, coming up short and landing in Ben Bugsy Siegel's neighborhood on Linden Drive in Beverly Hills. Remember, he came up 2 blocks short of the Los Angeles golf course, Los Angeles Country Club golf course. And he did that in June 1945, and Elizabeth Short's fiance was killed 2 months after Howard Hughes's plane crash. So now Elizabeth Short doesn't have a fiance, and her wedding plans have been canceled at age 20 years old. So in July 1946, Elizabeth Short relocates to Los Angeles, specifically to Long Beach, because she happens to know an United States Air Force Lieutenant, Joseph Gordon Frickling, who happened to be an acquaintance of her fiance that she met back in Miami, Florida. See, so this girl is pretty clever, right? So she ends up, I think, he provides housing for her at the Naval Reserve Air Base in Long Beach. That's code for Los Alamitos, people. That's where Lino LaBianca spent time. That's where Sharon Tate's father spent time. That's where Lou Brown, Nicole Brown Simpson's father, spent time. At the same time that Elizabeth Short is spending time there. Do you see? Do you see? Elizabeth Short is in the zip code of Sharon Tate's father, Nicole Brown Simpson's father. Okay? Who am I leaving out of this story? And the boyfriend of her fiance, Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Frickling, he's there too. So he probably knows Lou Brown, and he probably knows Paul Tate, Colonel Paul Tate, who may not have been a colonel yet. And Lino LaBianca, he's there too. Lino LaBianca, Colonel Paul Tate, Colonel Lou Brown, and Joseph Gordon Frickling. That's 4 men that Elizabeth Holmes may have known at Los Alamitos, aka Naval Reserve Air Base. It's a joint forces base for the United States Army, for the Navy, and for later for the Air Force. But anyway, so this is how Elizabeth Short gets repositioned to Los Angeles. It's through the military of Long Beach, San Pedro, and Los Alamitos. Anyway, she then attempts to get work as a waitress up near Hollywood Boulevard, where she's allegedly seen with Orson Welles in the CBS restaurant. There's the restaurants at the studios are all operated by one person, one clandestine person. And one of the restaurants is located on, I believe it's Hollywood Boulevard. I will provide a link below. It's called Brittingham's Radio Center Restaurant for CBS Radio Studios, located at Columbia Square in Hollywood. And to be very specific, that is on Sunset Boulevard. And I've got an address here somewhere, but the Brittingham's restaurant, they manage the concierge departments at Archeo Studios, Columbia Studios, MGM Metro Goldwyn Mayer, and the Selznick Studios. So in other words, they had many restaurants throughout Burbank, Studio City, Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, and this is where Elizabeth Short often had lunch. This is where all the big Hollywood stars like Orson Welles went there and was there when Elizabeth Short was there. He was implicated in the murder later, but never considered a suspect by police, who had a boatload of other suspects, none of whom were military intelligence, which tells you they're never going to solve the crime. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that Elizabeth Short didn't just come from under a rock, even though she didn't come from particularly strong background. She came from a broken family, but she was a military brat, and she followed older men around to their military assignments. That's how she gained free housing. And the last 5 months of her life, she was working as a waitress in Hollywood. They want you to believe that she was an aspiring actress, but she never got any auditions, and she was never booked as an actress. And as far as I know, she was never a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Okay, she was 22 years old when she was killed. She was 22 and a half years old, and she was murdered somehow. It's very difficult to know how she was killed because her body was mutilated, okay? And she was found within 24 hours of her death, but her body was cut into two pieces. And they did find a cement sack nearby where her body was found with watery blood in it. But they didn't have much in the way of DNA testing back in those days, 1947, January 16th. So what I wanted to tell you is that there she is, and she's 3 miles to the west of University of Southern California. She's 2.9 miles to the west of the Coliseum, where we celebrate steroid sports. Her murder was widely publicized by William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles Examiner newspaper. It was publicized by Life magazine. It was already a terrible thing, made worse through the media, psyops of terror, fear porn. And Life magazine is CIA. They bought the Zapruder film and never showed it. William Randolph Hearst, remember the Maine and to hell with Spain, the Spanish-American War, the sinking of the USS Maine in a United States Navy-controlled port of Havana, Cuba. That's William Randolph Hearst newspapers promoting a lie that the Spanish sunk a United States Navy ship in a controlled port facility that the Marines control. That's military intelligence. Okay? And Elizabeth Short, she only dates military men. Her father's working in a naval facility in Vallejo that brought you the Zodiac killings. Her first boyfriend is working at Vandenberg Space Air Base. Her second boyfriend's at Los Alamitos. Well, he actually, Miami, Florida, killed in the South Pacific. Her fourth boyfriend comes from Los Alamitos, Long Beach. And Matthew Michael Gordon. Joseph Gordon Frickling. And then she's killed at age 22. She couldn't have possibly done anything wrong. But the point is that she was in the wrong crowd. She got sacrificed and used in a Sharon Tate manner. All right, that's my story for today. I'm going to cut it off now. Believe me, I can go on and on this story. But the Black Dahliah story is completely enveloped with military intelligence fingerprints. Just like the Barry and Louise, what was their name? Barry Berman story. It's on controlled property that's used by Exxon. It's controlled property. It's the Ronald Reagan Ranch, Rancho del Cielo. That's military intelligence mountain. It's near Vandenberg Air Force Base. That's military controlled base. Los Alamitos and San Pedro and Terminal Island, that's all port facility, that's military controlled. That's where Elizabeth Short spent all her time. Navy Yard in Vallejo, Vandenberg Space Air Base in Lompoc, Los Alamitos Joint Forces Air Base in Long Beach. Okay? And then she's dumped in Leimert Park, 5 blocks from the Life magazine house, cut into 2 pieces by a surgical person who cut her body into 2 pieces with a Glasgow smile on her face and her eyes wide open. Posed, and I'm not going to get into the posing. The posing was pornographic, obscene scene. So what I wanted to tell you is that this is done to terrorize people in the Southern California area and then broadcasted out to the whole United States. Thank you, William Randolph Hearst, who later, we had the Patty Hearst kidnapping, another psyops. Don't believe anything you read in the newspaper. Don't believe any person who's running for president or governor or fake governor. Don't believe them. Don't believe Robert Kennedy Jr. Don't believe Ron DeSantis. Don't believe Gavin Newsom. Don't believe Dianne Goldman Feinstein. Don't believe Nancy Pelosi. Don't believe any of them. They're all bums, and they're worse than bums. They're all military intelligent, controlled, reading a script. Don't fall for the potato in the tailpipe. Everything is a complete lie. You need to personally check things out with your own eyes, and don't let the media tell you that your eyes are lying. Those lion eyes, like Hall & Oates, they sang a song called Those Lion Eyes. That's the oldest trick in the book, to not believe what you know is true and to believe what is false. That's military intelligence, psychological terrorism. Thanks, people. Have a great day. Feel free to share my videos. Hit the like and subscribe. Have a great day.